When you start a new game of Pokémon in Generation 1, the very first character that you see after the intro sequence is Professor Oak. He serves as a kind of framing device for the game, sending you off on your quest to catch them all at the start of the game, and then appearing at the end to assess your progress when you become the champion. And of course, he also moonlights as the guy who tells you when it is and is not appropriate to ride a bicycle, which is a very important job in that world. As a design, he starts out as the very image of a serious-minded scientist, with his white lab coat, open book, and ultra-severe black eyebrows. He comes across as a fairly stern figure, a bit of a patriarch perhaps, an image that he keeps in gold and silver. This softens, though, over the generations, with, I think, especially the anime doing a lot to gentle his image. Already in the Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes, he was looking a lot more cheerful, and nowadays when anyone thinks of Oak, they probably think of him as that cheerful old professor guy who's definitely dating Ash's mom. It's a peculiar evolution from stern father figure to favorite smiling grandpa, but I think he's a lot more likable this way. Pokémon protagonists are an interesting category of character design. They've gotten more distinctive over the years, but in Gen 1, the priority was on creating a player avatar generic enough that anyone could project themselves into him. And Red was a him, no gender options in Gen 1. But the sprite was kept quite nondescript, with the cap and jacket and backpack, the costuming, used as his defining features in contrast with the rival Blue, whose hair and face was used as a visual way to make him distinct and unique. In the Gen 1 artwork, Tsukimori depicts him as a skinny kid in a distinctly 90s idea of casual traveler fashion, quite bulky overall, and that was all reined in a lot for the Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes. Here, he starts to look a lot more streamlined and sleek, and looks a little bit older than his first incarnation. And by the time he appears with Blue and Sun and Moon, he's all grown up, the very image of a college student in casual wear, looking maybe a little bit too old to still be wearing that cap, but also possessed of a certain confidence in his posture and demeanor at this point. What was once a nondescript and generic player avatar now has gained a certain character all its own. I know he's not the same guy as in the anime, but I always thought of Blue as Gary. Being the rival character, he exists in large part to contrast the protagonist, so where Red is largely defined by his costuming, his cap, his backpack, and jacket, Blue is defined as a character by his spiky distinctive hair and his face with that cocky smile and those determined eyebrows. The Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes turns all of this up a notch, using his purple pants and tight black shirt to contrast with Red's colors and more sensible travel wear, and it really leans into the cockiness and coolness of his posturing and presentation. By the time he shows up in Black and White 2, though, he's ditched the purple pants for a more neutral earth tone that matches his hair, and he's wearing a more sensible jacket, which I think points at his somewhat more humble personality at that point. And by Sun and Moon, much like Red, he's all grown up, and with a much more laid-back attitude. He seems a little bit more goofy and relaxed, and frankly, I love that for him. That kid was so high-strung and anxious in the first games. I'm glad his friend has finally helped him calm down. Brock is the first major challenge in Gen 1, this tough and intimidating gym leader whose Pokémon are resistant to most of the moves you have access to if you didn't pick an advantageous starter. And simple though his sprite is, the design reflects that. He's shirtless with severe eyebrows and that cross-armed stance, with just a little bit of lighting trickery implying that he's being illuminated from below like a statue. Much like Professor Oak though, once the anime got its hands on him, he got gentled quite a bit, and his anime design has softened a lot over time to suit his nurturing Pokémon breeder/anime pervert personality. The games have kept a little bit more of that original rock-solid tough guy thing, but I don't think they've ever really tried to make him intimidating again. Or shirtless, for that matter. Brock is ultimately a simple design, but quite recognizable with his spiky hair, strong brows, and narrow eyes, which might be why he's never had a consistent costume. He remains fully recognizable regardless of what he's wearing, and that is, admittedly, a sign of a strong character design. Anyway, before I go, I just do have to bring up this JoJo-ass Brock from the Pocket Monsters manga, because, like, holy shit. Misty is another anime cast member who got changed quite substantially from her game incarnation. In Red and Green, she wears this sporty bikini arrangement with sandals, all to associate her with the ocean, the beach, and water, while in the anime, understandably, they wanted something a little bit more travel-sensible, and so she got her fairly iconic red suspenders and short shorts with that yellow top, which is frankly a much stronger character design. Misty's hairstyle, though, like many anime-style characters, is her major source of character recognition, which has the peculiar result that when she turns up in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, she's basically unrecognizable. Pokémon characters don't exactly have complex identifiable facial features a lot of the time, and without her most recognizable costume or hairstyle, Misty here, to me, ends up looking kinda like her own mom or something. I think the games could have benefited from at least adopting her color scheme from the anime on this one. I do like the jacket over the swimsuit, though. That has a sense of athletic practicality about it, which I think suits her, especially an older and more experienced version of her. Lieutenant Surge's line about his Pokemon protecting him during the war probably wasn't meant to be taken too seriously, but I remember even as a child being vaguely disturbed by the notion of Pokemon fighting and dying on a militarized modern battlefield. Wars would eventually become a major part of the franchise's lore, of course, but Surge talking about it means that one happened in living memory, and like, is that why the main character doesn't have a dad? Something about that just felt a little too real. Surge himself is the archetypal American overseas GI, a familiar type in Japanese culture. It's not a coincidence that Guile from Street Fighter looks so similar to him. He wears fatigues, boots, some kind of military insignia, and has short hair, all blonde of course, and usually presents with a big confident grin and some kind of confrontational pose. Additionally, in the anime and in Gold and Silver, he has a noticeable tan, which again matches up with the archetype of a US soldier stationed on the major bases in Okinawa, which has a subtropical climate. He's a big, loud, brash, physically imposing American associated with the electric typing, I think, as a kind of joke on American shock and awe military power. And while he's not much more than his archetype, the implications of his presence will forever make him memorable to me. Erika is the grass gym leader of Gen 1 and seems, for the most part, to be a play on the idea that a beautiful young woman is like a flower in bloom and other aphorisms of that kind. Certainly, in the context of a Japanese RPG, she seems to be based very much on traditional Japanese tropes of beauty and femininity. Her seated pose, serenely closed eyes, and that pokeball that seems to be floating towards her hand like a petal falling from a tree, it's all very of a kind. It's very archetypal with, in my opinion, seemingly not that much going on underneath the surface of the archetype. Which, to be fair, makes sense. Pokemon games are very much structured like children's cartoons, and they tend to be based on stereotypes and stock characters rather than any deep examination of human interiority. Still, I wish there was some sort of twist to Erika, some kind of unexpected detail to elevate her beyond the archetype. In all of her appearances, she is and remains simply the traditional beauty in the traditional dress. I will say, though, that in the Let's Go games, her red and green color scheme and the understated incorporation of flower motifs make for a really well-balanced and appealing design that very elegantly leads the mind to plants and flowers. That is just good craft. Like most of the Gen 1 gym leaders, Koga is an archetype. Specifically, he's the archetype of being a flipping ninja. He's got the tabi boots, the short-sleeved shirt, the armored leg braces, the whole 9 yards. Interestingly, though, he's an older ninja, a man who, especially in Red and Blue's artwork, looks anywhere from in his mid-30s to middle-aged, which I feel ties into his use of the poison type. Poison is a game of patience, after all, of strategy, and also an unidealistic strategy. It suits a character who is older and perhaps a little bit more jaded. The only real major change to Koga's design over time is the prominence of his scarf, which was added to his artwork in yellow and in the Let's Go games ends up becoming his ninja mask as well. The scarf brings his design from the somewhat reserved and understated right into ninja pop culture territory, evoking franchises like Strider Hero or Shinobi. It's loud, it's flashy, it's showy, and arguably makes him a little bit less intimidating. He looks less like a cynical old man dealing poison from the shadows and more like a TV ninja you'd see in a Super Sentai show, which your mileage may vary, but I kinda liked him better without the scarf. Sabrina is an interesting gym leader. In Gen 1, she wears a vaguely futuristic outfit, a bodysuit with a crop top jacket and a skirt on it that, for me, calls to mind 90s sci-fi anime, which matches the otherworldliness of her powers, I guess. And the Gen 1 remakes refine that futuristic vibe, giving her what looks essentially like a skin-tight rubber suit and making her hairstyle smooth and angular, with heavy bangs over the eyes closing off her face and expression. The Let's Go games, the other Gen 1 remakes, pull in a different direction, though, giving her a corset which is a little bit more old school, while adding a lot of clasps and buckles on her back, almost as though she needs restraints to hold back her power. Couple that with an intense golden stare from out under those heavy bangs, and she looks striking here and quite lethal. Heart Gold and Soul Silver, though, go off on entirely their own thing, dropping her suddenly into modern, at least for 2009, low-rise jeans and a spaghetti crop top with a wilder and more spiky hairstyle that gain a strong contrast in those smooth bracelets that now channel her power. This Sabrina looks much more unrestrained and free than her former self, and the storytelling implied by that transformation, while unstated, is fascinating to me. So, there's definitely fanfiction about Blaine being Dr. Eggman's cousin or something, right? There must be. Rather like Eggman, though, Blaine plays the part of a slightly inscrutable imperious scientist with his long white coat and tie, something that visually connects with the central feature of Cinnabar Island being a broken-down research lab. The bald head is classic design language for intellectualism, his round glasses make his eyes dark and inscrutable, the mustache makes him a stately and patriarchal figure, and it creates a stern and somewhat intimidating character design, especially to an audience of children. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, though, Blaine lightens up a little bit, donning more of a mischievous uncle on vacation fit with a Panama hat, vest, and snazzy cane, which makes him altogether less menacing, but also, I think, a lot more fun. The Let's Go games, taking another shot at his Gen 1 design, do something quite brilliant, though, by giving him a red and orange tie, which is seemingly burned up at the bottom. It's a little bit of roughness on his otherwise smooth and respectable scientist facade, and a little bit of an implication that this is a man who gets into trouble, who steps close to danger. It implies that a passionate heart burns under his stern exterior, and it's a small change, but it has a big impact on how he reads as a character. When you play a Pokemon game, you're usually guaranteed to run into some kind of antagonistic team of bad guys, usually led by some over-the-top anime villain archetype with silly hair and a crazy costume. They are good Saturday morning cartoon villains, but they're never really that intimidating or scary. In Gen 1, though, we get Giovanni, a man who looks less like a Saturday morning cartoon villain and more like he enjoys personally crushing the kneecaps of anyone who crosses him and telling them how it breaks my heart to do this to your family when he puts his gun to their forehead. And Giovanni's menace comes from his simplicity. He has short, sleek back hair, high temples, and a strong widow's peak. He wears a one-tone fitted suit and a simple high-collar shirt or turtleneck. There's no theater to Giovanni, no posturing, no over-the-top costuming, no out-there hairstyle or fancy gadgets. He looks like a mobster. He looks like someone who's accustomed to using violence to get his way and who isn't above using it on you if he has to. After all, kids go missing on their Pokemon journey all the time. What's one more 10-year-old floating down the river? Lorelei, the first of the Elite Four, is also, I believe, the first Ice-type trainer in Pokemon history. Partly this comes down to Ice just being a really rare type in Gen 1, which makes Lorelei a suitably novel challenge to deal with. Pity that Ice is so defensively weak. With her round glasses, pencil skirt, high heels, suit jacket, and smartly tied back hair, Lorelei is the picture of the professional lady, sharp and mature and composed. And that all works really well with her Ice typing. She's a literal Ice Queen. Interestingly, though, she's rendered as a fiery redhead in most of her appearances, which color-wise at least implies a little bit of a temper or some explosive feeling underneath that professional exterior. Her look has not always been consistent, though. Fire Red and Leaf Green put her in a purple skirt and gave her a high-collared, vaguely sporty sleeveless top, which I'm not really a fan of. It feels like they tried to make her athletic-esque, and that just doesn't work for me, especially with her Ice typing and the general professional lady aesthetic that she's working with. The Let's Go games instead lean way harder into the mature office lady aesthetic, with a windowed top under a low-cut suit jacket and stockings, which frankly make her look a lot more sharp and intimidating, and really quite attractive. Pity she doesn't get more fan art. Ah, Bruno, second of the Elite Four. I remember thinking for some reason that he was Brock's dad when I was a kid. Given his rock typing, his eyebrows, and the fact that he's shirtless, I can perhaps be forgiven for the mistake, but, I don't know where that even came from. Bruno is very much the picture of a rough-hewn martial arts man with his torn pants and messy hair and the studded training weights that he wears around his wrists. Combine that with his black belt and his presentation sitting meditatively on the ground, he's fully on some mountain hermit training strength by punching rocks to powder sort of business, and he's never really changed that much. Besides some stylistic updates, Bruno has remained basically the same in every generation he has shown up in, even though the Let's Go games did change his anatomy to be a little bit more broad and stout than the gym shredded look that he sometimes has in other games, and I like that. That's more the body type of a guy who lifts boulders on a mountain. His wild, unkempt hair with those sideburn bangs makes him look uncivilized and wild, which fits his vibe, but I'm really missing some kind of twist or standout physical feature that would make his design more than merely its obvious archetype. I don't really have much reason to ever remember Bruno or think about him. He's not that interesting. Third of the Elite Four, Agatha is a scary bitch. Her design is partly sweet grandmother with her old-school dress and apron, and partly terrifying matriarch with her high forehead, strong hairstyle, and that gnarled cane held imperiously straight out in front of her. Even in her tiny Game Boy sprite, her intense expression and powerful eyebrows give a genuine sense of menace to this old bat, which I really appreciate. I also appreciate that none of her subsequent appearances have ever tried to soften or gentle her or pretty her up. Agatha is always old, always flinty, and always scary. On the other hand, though, simply being old isn't really enough to make her read visually as a ghost-type trainer. Hell, if anything, I think her original design would be a great fit for a Steel-type trainer if that had existed back then. Hence, the Let's Go games update her design by adding a leafy green shawl and some decoration and gives her a slightly more poofy dress, which along with a spookier cane instantly makes her far more witch-like and mystical in her aspect. I also like her sensible boots in this design too. It's the kind of footwear that you would wear if you lived in a mystical cottage in the woods. She's crusty as hell in this design, which gives her a ton of personality and menace, and I really frickin' like her. She's cool. On the one hand, Lance, leader of the Elite Four, looks f***ing ridiculous. He looks like a dork, a complete goddamn nerd. On the other hand, when I was a kid, I thought he was cool as hell, so maybe Ken Sugimori was onto something here. And yeah, a big regal cloak is a good move for a dragon trainer. A little bit of fantasy flair suits that particular type, and as time has gone on, Lance's outfit has transitioned from being a weird Dragon Ball-esque leather and shiny pants arrangement into something much more regal and fantasy prince-like. Heart Gold and Soul Silver gave his cloak a high collar and chained clasp and made his hair symmetrical, making him look less chaotic and wild, and the Let's Go games, always good for a great design update, added wing-like details to the back of his cloak along with a fine stitched pattern on his jacket and a much more cheerful, friendly, and a handsome aspect to his face. He's almost completely unrecognizable from his original design here, which, well, maybe is a bit of a loss, actually. Although I think his new design is better, I do miss some of the alienating 90s weirdness of his original conception. Maybe a dragon trainer shouldn't look too friendly and too nice. Maybe they should look a little bit weird and off-putting, like they come from a completely different world. Just a thought. The Pokemon Center lady is not the genetic freak show that is the Nurse Joy clone family, but in fact a separate character. And despite showing up in every single game as an essential character, until very recently there was next to no experimentation or evolution in her design. In every game she's a very feminine lady, neither cartoony nurse scrubs or else something that looks more like a nurse uniform maid dress. X and Y and Sword and Shield especially lean into this more traditional style. She has pink hair, usually arranged in various hoop styles, and pink and white clothes positively oozing with nurturing femininity. The nurses are universally female, which along with their outdated uniforms is one of those weirdly conservative touches of the Pokemon world. A small piece of the world building which seems stuck sometime in the 1960s. Scarlet and Violet finally changed things up, changing the role of Pokecenter nurse to more of a convenience store attendant, which, given that the healing of Pokemon involves little more than shoving them into a machine and pressing a button, makes a certain degree of sense. They hold on to the pink hair, but replace the cartoony nurse scrubs with Pokemon-branded aprons. And in the DLC, we even get a sideways baseball cap wearing more heavily made-up variant with a little bit more personality and attitude. The design of Pokemon NPC classes can be extremely bland, so personally, I'm happy to see a bit more variety and texture. Every Pokemon protagonist has a mom, but only very few of them have a dad. It's an odd thing, almost as though the presence of a father is somehow disruptive to the core fantasy of the series. Perhaps it's that having two parents would be too much attachment for the protagonist, too many reasons to want to go home. Or maybe it's simply that while mom, nurturing, caretaking mom, serves a gameplay function by healing your Pokemon, there's nothing for a stereotypical dad figure to do. It could also just be the pressure of tradition. Gen 1 probably quite literally didn't have enough memory space in the cartridge for a dad character, and then, pattern established, the entire rest of the series just replicated that dynamic in the name of consistency. Who can say? In Gen 1 though, Mom is not very much of a character. She sends you off at the start of the game, but from that moment on, there is next to no reason to ever speak to her again. Commensurately, her design is little more than a generic woman sprite with no original concept art that I've been able to find. Long black hair with a side part and a dress, she is nothing more than a symbol of the home that you leave behind for your journey. The anime at least give a little bit more thought to the mom character, giving Dealey a catch-em-up personality and things to do while her son is out adventuring. Have you seen the Kiana Mundi comics shipping her with Jessie? They're pretty fantastic. Look them up. Leaf, or Green, is a curious little piece of Gen 1 history. What seems like a prototype version of her design appears on the cover of the official Red and Blue strategy guide, where she's the trainer of Squirtle, facing off against Red's Bulbasaur and Blue's Charmander. She also appeared briefly in some instructional comics in a Pokemon papercraft manual, again with Red and Blue as though she's part of a trio. Her design was then eventually adapted into both the official Pokemon manga as the character Green, and then became the basis for Leaf, who is the female protagonist of the Fire Red and Leaf Green games. With her bucket hat shadowing her eyes and the frizzy hair poking out from underneath, Leaf always came across to me as a slightly more mischievous character than Red or Blue, and the lean back posture with a Pokeball held surreptitiously behind her back in her primary artwork reinforces that vibe to me. Perhaps where Red is the simple shonen protagonist and Blue is the arrogant rival, Leaf is the clever one, the trickster of the group. Anyway, her outfit is a fairly straightforward adventurous girl outfit. Sleeveless top and a short skirt, leg warmers and slip-on shoes, and a big yellow shoulder bag which contrasts with Red's chunky backpack. It's a solid, if unremarkable, protagonist design, and I'd be really curious to see her come back in future games like Red and Blue have. Like, what would she look like as a full-grown woman? How would she have developed?